The smoke from the fire rose without being invited. The priests had not called for him. They never did. The yajna burned in the center of the enclosure. Ghee poured with precision, mantras recited in the exact sequence the Rig Veda demanded, and around the sacred fire stood every figure the Vedic order considered worthy of the offering. Indra received his portion. Agni, as the conduit between worlds, received his. Varuna was named. Mitra was named. The ritual moved through its ordained sequence like water through a fixed channel. But there was a gap in the circle, a deliberate absence. One name was not spoken. One figure was not assigned a seat among the flames, and the priests knew exactly whose name they were withholding. That absence was not an oversight. It was policy. The forests beyond the ritual enclosure were not empty. They had never been empty. In the outer territories, where the cultivated land gave way to dense growths of Ashvatha trees, where no yajna fire burned and no Brahmin kept record, there was a presence older than the chance, not waiting, not displaced, simply located in a different register of existence than the one the Vedic priests had chosen to administer. The deer moved around him. The serpents did not flee. The ash on his body was not applied for ceremony. It was the ash of things that had already ended, and that recognition alone placed him outside every category the Vedic system had constructed for its divine inhabitants. Rudra was not created by the Vedic order. He was encountered by it. The Rig Veda contains hymns addressed to Rudra. They are unlike any other hymns in the text. They do not celebrate. They do not request abundance, rain, victory in battle, or healthy offspring. They ask with careful precision that Rudra go elsewhere, that his arrows land far from the settlement, that his anger, if it must fall somewhere other than here. The Sri Rudram, one of the oldest liturgical compositions in the Vedic corpus, names him Lord of the forests, Lord of those who dwell in the margins, Master of beasts, ruler of what exists outside the fire. Every epithet is spatial. Every title is a description of what lies beyond the boundary of organized ritual life. Rudra was the god of the perimeter. And the Vedic priests understood from the beginning that what exists at the perimeter cannot be ignored, only managed. Management was a system. The Vedic order ran on sacrifice. The yajna was not a ceremony in the modern sense of the word. It was an operational protocol, a mechanism for maintaining the flow of energy between the human world and the divine. The devas received oblations and returned rainfall, fertility, military success, and cosmic stability. Every god in the system had a function, a portion, a scheduled presence within the sacrificial economy. Brahma held creation. Vishnu held preservation. Indra administered the celestial armies. Agni served as the living interface between the world of men and the world of gods. The system was intricate, internally consistent, and deeply political. It operated on the logic of reciprocal obligation, dana and dakshina, offering and return. Rudra had no assigned place in that economy. He did not protect harvests. He did not bring rain on schedule. He did not lead armies against asuras on behalf of settled kingdoms. What he did was erupt in storms, in disease, in the sudden death of animals and children, in the violence of the wild that no yajna could fully contain. He was not hostile to the Vedic system. He was simply indifferent to it. And indifference, in a system built entirely on mutual obligation, was the most destabilizing force possible. The Vedic priests did not attempt to destroy what they could not control. They attempted to contain it. The Shatarudriya prayers in the Yajur Veda list 108 names and manifestations of Rudra, each name a careful boundary marker, a verbal map of his domain designed to keep that domain defined and therefore in some sense manageable. By naming every one of his aspects, the priests were constructing a fence around him. The naming was not worship in the devotional sense. It was taxonomy, and taxonomy is always a form of power. But the fence had a flaw. Rudra was not the only force that existed outside the Vedic boundary. Approximately 5,000 years before the Puranas were compiled, in the cities of the Indus Valley, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Dholavira, a civilization flourished that the Vedic tradition did not create and could not fully absorb. These were urban settlements with standardized weights and measures, sophisticated drainage systems, and a symbolic vocabulary that left no epic poetry, but left objects. One of those objects is a soapstone seal, small enough to fit in a closed hand, found in the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro. It depicts a figure seated in what later traditions would recognize as a yogic posture. Cross-legged, spine upright, heels pressed together. The figure has 3 faces. It is surrounded by animals: a rhinoceros, a buffalo, an elephant, a tiger. 2 deer stand at its feet. No Vedic text describes this figure. No hymn names it. No yajna assigns it a portion. Scholars have called this figure the Proto-Shiva. The name is a retroactive classification, applied from the outside, centuries after the seal was made. But the structural resonances are real and documented. The 3 faces, the seated posture, the surrounding animals, the absence of weapons. This was not a warrior god. This was not a god of rain or fire or military victory. This was something the Vedic system had no category for, a god of stillness at the center of wildness, a lord of living creatures who did not hunt them, but sat among them. The figure predates the Rig Veda by at least 2,000 years. Whatever it represented it before Rudra received his first hymn. The Vedic expansion southward and eastward across the subcontinent was not a military conquest in any simple sense. It was the slow overlay of one symbolic system onto territories where other symbolic systems were already operating. The priests moved with the settlements. The yajna fire moved with the priests. And everywhere the yajna fire moved, it encountered populations that had been venerating their own forces for generations. Forces that did not fit the Vedic functional taxonomy. Forces that could not simply be classified as devas or asuras because they belonged to a third category the Vedic system had not constructed. The response was not suppression. Suppression requires a confrontation, and the forces in question were too widespread, too embedded in too many communities to confront directly. The response was synthesis, and synthesis, when it is politically motivated, fares always an act of controlled alteration. Rudra was the closest thing the Vedic system had to what these non-Vedic populations were already venerating. He was peripheral. He was associated with animals and forests and the dangerous wildness outside settled life. He was already positioned at the boundary, so the boundary was redrawn. Rudra and the unnamed force of Mohenjo-Daro were mapped onto each other, not because they were identical, but because the overlap was sufficient for administrative purposes. 2 different forces, emerging from 2 different civilizational systems, were compressed into a single theological figure. That figure was given a new name, Shiva, the auspicious one. The naming was precise. Rudra was not auspicious. He was feared. The Pashupati of the Indus Valley had no textual record that could be confirmed as auspicious or inauspicious. It simply was. The name Shiva was a rebranding operation. It took 2 forces that the Vedic system could not absorb on their own terms and reassigned them a single identity that the system could, in principle, contain. The auspicious one could be given a place in the cosmic hierarchy. The auspicious one could be assigned a portion of the sacrifice. The auspicious one could be made part of the Trimurti, the administrative triad of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, where creation, preservation, and dissolution operated as a closed cycle. But the compression left residue. The Puranas are not a unified document. They are a library, a contested, multiply-authored, historically layered archive of competing claims about the structure of the cosmos and the rank of its divine inhabitants. The Shiva Purana insists that Shiva is the supreme Brahman, the singular, undivided consciousness from which Brahma and Vishnu themselves emerge. The Bhagavata Purana, which operates from a Vaishnava framework, positions Shiva as a magnificent but secondary figure, powerful, worthy of respect, but not the source. The Linga Purana and the Vishnu Purana give different answers to the same question about cosmic hierarchy. These are not theological debates in the abstract sense. They are historical records of different communities, Shaiva, Vaishnava, Shakta, each writing their own tradition into the canonical record at different moments in Indian history, each attempting to fix in text what could not be fixed in practice. The episode of Daksha's sacrifice is embedded in multiple Puranas for a reason. In that episode, Daksha, a Prajapati, a lord of created beings, a figure of impeccable Brahmanic lineage, organizes a grand yajna and deliberately excludes Shiva from the invitation list. He does not omit Shiva by accident. He refuses him a seat at the sacred fire as a statement of precedence. Daksha belongs to the older Vedic order. He operates by its logic. In that logic, Shiva, regardless of how many epithets the Shatarudriya has assigned him, remains an outsider. The synthesis had given Shiva a name. It had not given him an unconditional place. Sati, daughter of Daksha, wife of Shiva, attends the sacrifice despite not being invited, and when she arrives, she finds herself the only one in that assembly who understands what her father's exclusion of her husband actually means. It does not mean personal animosity. It means that the Vedic order, even after centuries of synthesis, still maintains an internal hierarchy in which the force Shiva represents has never been fully accepted. She does not survive the weight of that recognition. Shiva's response is not emotional in the narrative logic of the Puranas, it is structural. He sends Virabhadra, a force generated from his own matted hair, a force that is not separate from him, but an expression of what happens when the peripheral is pushed past its limit, and Virabhadra moves through Daksha's sacrifice with the systematic precision of a structure dismantling itself. Heads are removed, the sacred fire is extinguished, the assembled devas scatter. Daksha's head is cut off and later replaced with a goat's head, which is not a humiliation in the decorative sense, but a reassignment of category. Daksha is now no longer a Prajapati of pure Brahmanic lineage. He carries the mark of the animal world. He has been reclassified, the sacrifice was destroyed. But the conflict that produced it was not resolved by destroying the sacrifice. It was only acknowledged. The tension persisted into the textual record because it was structurally unresolvable. The Vedic order needed Shiva. The devotional traditions of hundreds of millions of people across the subcontinent were built around Shaivite practice. The Shiva Linga, the temples to Mahakala, the aniconic worship forms that predated Sanskrit literacy, the oral traditions of forest communities and mountain peoples who had never had access to a Brahminic yajna, but who had always had access to what Shiva represented. To remove Shiva from the canonical record would have been to remove the ground beneath half the religious life of the subcontinent. The synthesis was therefore not optional. It was the only viable administrative choice. But the synthesis created a document trail. Every Purana that elevates Shiva to supreme status is, in the same gesture, responding to a prior document that had subordinated him. Every text that declares Shiva and Vishnu identical, Harihara, the composite form, is resolving a conflict that the composite form itself proves existed. The resolution is visible in the seam. The seam is the proof of the alteration. The stones of Mohenjo-daro do not contain that seam. The soapstone seal with the three-faced figure surrounded by animals predates the entire architecture of synthesis, competition, and canonical revision. It predates the name Shiva. It predates the name Rudra. It predates the Vedic system that eventually gave both names their theological weight. Whatever force that seal was made to represent, it was represented before any of the texts that now define it were written. The force existed. The texts came later. The naming came later still. What the Puranas describe as the Lord of Dissolution, the third member of the cosmic triad, the one who holds the drum and the trident and the serpent, who dances on the back of ignorance, whose third eye burns what has exceeded its cycle, is a construction assembled over millennia from at least two distinct sources that were never fully identical. The ash that covers Shiva's body in every iconographic tradition is the ash of endings. That is the one element that traveled unaltered from Rudra to Pashupati to Shiva, across every synthesis and every revision. The acknowledgement that what this force represents does not preserve. It does not create on schedule. It exists at the point where cycles exhaust themselves. The Vedic order built a system around that point. It named it, contained it, assigned it a role in the Trimurti, gave it a consort and children and a mountain residence and an elaborate iconography. The point itself remained indifferent to all of it. The seal in Mohenjo-daro is still in the National Museum in New Delhi. It sits behind glass. The figure on it has not moved in 5,000 years. The animals around it have not fled. The posture has not shifted. Whatever it was before the Vedic order encountered it and needed to name it, it was that first.